Chapter 1. The Rejection, Lyra's POV. They say when you meet your mate, the world stills. I expected warmth, a soft ache in the chest, a breathless kind of wonder. But when I locked eyes with him across the moonlit glade, all I felt was dread. The lunar gathering was meant to be sacred, a time when unmated wolves from every corner of the kingdom gathered beneath the silvered moon to find what fate had written in the stars. It was my first. My last, I had promised myself. I'd only come for appearances to avoid being marked as rogue. I never expected this. The forest was a hush of rustling leaves, bodies dancing, laughter echoing, flickering lanterns hung from branches like fire spirits, casting long shadows on the ground. But the moment his gaze met mine, the noise drained away. It was like the world had sunk beneath water, muffled, heavy, timeless. He didn't move, just stood there on the other side of the glade, as though carved from obsidian and moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, wild black hair fell to his jaw, unkempt and damp from mist. He wore no crest, no pack colours. His eyes, gods, they were not gold like most alphas. They were the deep red of fresh blood and burning embers, watching me, devouring me, and I felt it. The mate bond ignited like a blade drawn across my ribs. I couldn't breathe. My wolf whimpered, clawing to the surface. My body took one step toward him, just one, before I forced it to stop. No, I whispered aloud. No, no, no. Because when our skin brushed, his fingers catching mine in passing, it wasn't love or lust or fate I felt. It was death. Visions crashed into my skull like a flood, my mother screaming, blood dripping from my hands, a throne of bones, fire swallowing a blackened castle. His voice whispering in my ear, "You're mine, Lyra. You always were." I recoiled like I'd touched poison. He flinched, his hand lowered, but he didn't speak, not a word, just stared at me like I had gutted him with silence. I could have walked away, could have let it fade. Instead, I did something unforgivable. I lifted my chin, locked eyes with him, and said it clearly, so the whole glade would hear. I reject you. Gas rippled through the crowd. The music faltered. Every wolf in earshot turned toward me, like I'd just spat in the moon goddess's face. The man's expression didn't change. Not anger, not sadness, just stillness. A cold, eerie calm that made my skin crawl. He stepped closer. My heart pounded, my body readying to shift, but he only leaned in just enough for me to hear the quietest whisper against my cheek. "You'll regret this." Then he walked away. Just like that. No name, no plea, no fight. Gone. And that should have been the end of it, but the shadows didn't let me go. 2 hours later, I was running through the forest with blood on my hands. The gathering had descended into chaos. Screams tore through the night as guards raced toward the eastern cliffs. A howl shattered the stillness, beta colder from my pack calling for help. My mother's scent had vanished. I knew what that meant. I tore through the trees like a storm, my heart a war drum in my chest. The moon above was already tilting toward eclipse, an omen. I reached our camp, breath ragged. Tents were slashed open, supplies burned, the guards were gone. Blood painted the grass, and in the centre, my mother's pendant, twisted, broken. I dropped to my knees, clutching it. There was no body, no signs of life, just that single, deliberate message. She's gone, and it's your fault. I screamed until my throat tore. They say the moon goddess chooses your mate to protect you, to balance you, to make you whole. But I was already broken. I buried the pendant at the edge of the cliff where we used to sit when I was a child. I made no vow, said no prayer. There was no point. By morning I was gone from the lands of my birth. I tore the mark of my pack from my skin with a silver blade. No ties, no name, no future, only one rule. Trust no one, mate with no one. And never, ever regret the rejection. But even then, deep in the back of my mind, buried beneath grief and fury, a voice whispered, "He warned you. You'll regret this." Chapter 2, Ashes of the Past. Lyra's POV. There's a silence that comes after grief, not the sharp, keening kind, but something quieter, deeper. It sinks into your bones and leaves there, makes a home of your ribs and feeds off the parts of you thought were untouchable. That silence was all I had for weeks. After the lunar gathering, I ran north, past the ghost woods where the trees turned to ash and no birds sang. No pack dared cross the withered valley, not since the last war. But I wasn't a pack wolf anymore. I was rogue, nameless, unclaimed. Nothing. The winds in the north were cruel and sharp, like they knew I didn't belong. My skin grew tougher, my teeth sharper, and slowly, day by day, The girl who had once dreamt of love, home, and peace faded into something harder, something cold. I survived by stealing from merchant wagons and outrunning bounty wolves who saw rogues as sport. I slept in hollowed trees, learned to move without a sound, learned to kill without hesitation. I became a shadow, and yet, despite everything, I couldn't forget his eyes. Blood red, burning. The mate I rejected hadn't returned to the gathering. No one spoke his name. No one even remembered him. It was as though he'd vanished into smoke the moment I turned him away. But sometimes, at night, I could still feel his gaze, like it lingered just beyond the firelight, watching, waiting. I found the oracle 2 moons later. She lived deep in the Ravenspire caves, a place said to drive wolves mad. The stone walls whispered in languages I didn't know. The air was thick with salt and old magic. But I went anyway because when you've lost everything, even madness feels like a gift. She wasn't what I expected. She wasn't old or frail. She had no milky eyes or crooked bones, no potions or spellbooks. She was young, skin like moonstone, hair white as snow, braided down her back, and eyes that burned brighter than any alpha's. She sat beside an underground pool, her reflection broken by ripples that didn't come from her. "You reek of fire," she said without looking at me. "But it hasn't awakened yet. I need answers. They're not the kind you'll like. I don't care." She smiled like she knew that was a lie. "Then listen carefully, little wolf, because you're not running from fate, you're running toward it." My fists clenched. I rejected my mate. I know. Then why can I still feel him? She looked up, finally, and the air thickened because the bond didn't break. That wasn't possible. Rejection severs the mate bond. It's final, irreversible. Every wolf knows that. "No," I whispered. "Yes," she said, "because what binds you two is older than the moon oath, older than the pacts, older than this realm, and it won't let go. I saw death when I touched him. You saw the truth. What does that mean?" She rose, and the entire cave seemed to tilt. Her voice shifted, layered like 2 people speaking at once. "The king will wear the face of the one you hate. The girl of fire will burn the throne or wear it. One will rise, one will fall, and neither will survive untouched." The pool at her feet boiled suddenly. Her eyes rolled back. I reached for her, but she was already gone, collapsed like a puppet cut from its strings. The cave began to shake. I ran. Outside, I collapsed beneath the trees. Gasping. Fire. Throne. King. Was she saying Kael would be king? That couldn't be right. He wore no crest, had no name, no territory. Kings were chosen through bloodlines, power and ceremony, not mystery and shadows. Unless he wasn't from here. That night I dreamed of fire again. But this time I was the one burning, not him. My skin cracked like porcelain, glowing from within. The trees caught flame around me, and in the centre stood my mother, untouched by the fire, her mouth moving, saying something I couldn't hear. I reached for her and woke to the smell of smoke. But it wasn't a dream. My campfire had spread. A small spark had touched the trees, and flames had licked the trunks. I scrambled to douse it, and when my hand plunged into the flame, nothing happened. No pain, no burn. My skin glowed faintly gold, then settled. I stumbled back, staring at my hands. This wasn't normal. This wasn't wolf magic. This was something else, something older. The next day I was followed. I caught the scent an hour after dawn, clean, precise, like snow on steel. Whoever it was, they moved too quietly for any regular bounty hunter. I lured them toward a cliffside, waited until they were close, then spun with my blade drawn, only to find a cloaked figure standing calmly, arms behind their back. "You've grown," they said, voice low and unfamiliar. "The fire suits you." "Who are you?" I snarled. They removed their hood, and I froze, because in their hand was a letter, a torn parchment, sealed with the sigil of my family, my mother's seal. She had died. I saw the blood, buried her pendant with my own hands, and yet the letter was dated 3 days after the lunar gathering. After she died, I took it with trembling fingers, tore it open. "Lyra, if you're reading this, then it means you found the edge of the truth. They are lying to you. He is not your enemy. He is the key. Find the door." The figure was already gone, and just like that, the ashes of my past began to burn again. Only this time, I wasn't sure what would rise from them. Chapter 3, The Shadow Invitation. Lyra's POV. The letter never should have existed. My mother was dead, her pendant buried beneath cliffside stone, and yet her handwriting curled across the parchment like living memory. I read it again, until the words etched themselves into the back of my eyelids. He is not your enemy. He is the key. Find the door. What door? What key? Was she talking about him? About Kael? No. I rejected him. That bond should be dust. Gone. But still, my fingers trembled at the thought of his name. My body remembered what my mind refused to admit. I needed answers. Not from oracles, not from shadows, from the source. So I headed east, to the Broken Spine Mountains. No wolf dared cross them, not since the War of Black Fire. But I wasn't most wolves anymore. I'd survived rogues, oracles, bounty killers. If Kael was the key, I would kick down the damn door. I didn't know then that the door would find me first. They came at dusk, cloaked in black. No scent, no footsteps, just there, suddenly, like the wind had stitched them into the air. I had just finished making camp in a narrow pass between two jagged peaks when they appeared. 5 figures in dark robes, masks of bone and obsidian covering their faces. No eyes, no voices, just one scroll. They dropped it before me and vanished like smoke. I didn't breathe as I unravelled the parchment. You are invited to the Court of Shadows, a summons by royal command. Decline and be hunted, accept and be judged. At the bottom, a crest I had never seen before. It wasn't of any pack, not mortal. It showed a split crown with fire curling from one side and a crescent moon on the other. And there, written beneath it in ink that shimmered like starlight, Kael, King of the Shadow Realms. I stared at that name until my hands went numb. King. He was a king? Of what? No one ruled the Shadow Realms. They were myth, a bedtime story to scare pups, a place where monsters went when they died. But if that was true, why did the letter burn at the edges like it was written in real fire? Why did my mark, the faint curve behind my neck where a mate bond should have faded, suddenly ache? I followed the summons, not because I trusted it, not because I believed in any king, but because my mother said he was the key, and I wanted to know exactly what that key opened, so I could slam it shut forever. The journey took 3 days through impossible terrain. The air grew colder, time slowed, colours dulled to grayscale. By the second night, even the moon disappeared. My wolf growled constantly beneath my skin, unsure whether to fight or flee. But when I crossed the final ridge, the world changed. One moment I was in the mountains. The next, I was in another realm. The Shadow Realm was not made for mortals. It was too quiet, too still. The trees looked petrified, their bark the colour of frostbitten flesh. The sky was ink, but stars moved like watching eyes. The wind whispered secrets I couldn't understand. Every step forward made my skin crawl like the air was pressing against me, testing whether I belonged. I didn't. And yet, something inside me stirred. Not fear, not danger. Recognition. The Court of Shadows rose from the heart of a valley carved into the mountain's roots. Black spires like spears stabbed at the sky, wrapped in thorned vines and glowing silver runes. Wolves in dark armour stood guard at every bridge and gate, their faces unreadable, their eyes glowing faintly with the same red fire I remembered in Kael. He wasn't just king, he was their alpha. And he'd called me here. They didn't speak as they led me through the halls, just nodded, bowed, opened doors as if I was already expected, as if I belonged. The palace smelled of old stone and ash. I passed rooms filled with strange magic, mirrors that whispered as I walked past, tapestries that moved without wind, portraits of wolves with eyes that followed me like ghosts. At last we reached 2 towering obsidian doors carved with the crest I'd seen on the scroll, the broken crown of fire and moon. They opened on their own, and there, seated on a black stone throne high above a dais of silver steps, was him. Kael. He had changed. The wildness was still there, coiled beneath his skin like a storm barely contained, but now he wore it like armour. A crown of bone and flame rested on his dark hair, and his crimson eyes glowed brighter than I remembered. He didn't flinch, didn't rise, just looked at me with that same unreadable calm he'd worn the night I rejected him, and said, in a voice that echoed through every stone of that cursed throne room, "Welcome to my kingdom, mate." My knees almost buckled, not from the bond, not from fear, but from knowing, in that single instant, that nothing I believed about him, about myself, about anything, had ever been real. "Why me?" I asked finally, stepping forward. "Why summon me?" His gaze didn't waver. "Because your rejection wasn't the end," he said. "It was the beginning." I swallowed. Of what? He rose from the throne, and every guard in the room bowed their heads as he passed. When he reached me, he leaned down the way he had the first time, just close enough that only I could hear. Of war. Chapter 4. Court of Masks, Lyra's POV. The throne room emptied after Kael's words. The guards filed out like whispers on the wind, leaving just the two of us in that vast echoing chamber of black stone and secrets. He said nothing more. Neither did I. My heart hadn't slowed since I arrived. My instincts screamed to run, to shift, to claw my way out of the shadow realm, but I stood my ground. "You're a king now," I finally said, my voice low. "Funny, you didn't mention that when you were busy hiding behind trees at the gathering." Kael's jaw flexed. He turned, walking back toward the obsidian throne. "I wasn't hiding. I was watching." "Watching what? For the right moment to snatch me and bring me to your creepy death kingdom?" He sat slowly, the crown tilting ever so slightly as his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You were the only one who could see this place for what it is." I narrowed my eyes. A prison? A mirror. He offered me a room in the east wing. I almost refused, almost stormed out into the night just to prove I wasn't afraid. But I was afraid. Not of Kael, of the part of me that felt drawn here, like the Shadow Realm was a place I'd dreamed before. And so I stayed. The room was luxurious in that cold, ancient way that felt like a warning more than a welcome. Stone walls, silver-framed mirrors that didn't always show my reflection. A bed too soft for a rogue like me. Every candle burned with a blue flame. The door didn't lock, not from the inside. The next morning, I was summoned to the Court of Shadows. I wore the same black leathers I arrived in. Let them see the rogue. Let them underestimate me. Kael wasn't present. Instead, I found a circular hall, towering and domed, with a night sky ceiling that moved with real stars. 12 thrones ringed the room, each carved from different obsidian beasts, wolf, raven, serpent, bear, and seated among them were the high nobles of the realm. And her, Queen Idris. She sat on the wolf throne, clothed in black silk and venom. Her eyes were a shade too sharp. Her smile was the kind that made your blood go cold. "Welcome," she purred. "To the court, Lady Lyra." "I'm not a lady," I replied. "Not yet." They asked questions, cloaked as conversation. "How did you meet the king?" "Were you aware of your significance to our bloodlines? Do you dream of fire, Lyra? Has it awakened in you yet?" Every word, every glance was a test, a trap. Idris tilted her head. "We've waited centuries for a bloodfire heir to reappear. Imagine our delight when the king found you." I froze. "I never said I was bloodfire." She smiled like a serpent in silk. "You didn't need to. It's written in your scent. Your fire sleeps under your skin." That was when I realized it. They weren't afraid of me because I was Kael's mate. They were afraid of what I could become. They think I don't know the rules of their game. Let them. I met Thorn that night. He found me on the palace terrace, watching the black stars slide across a purple sky. He wore no crown, no armor, just a shadow cloak and a crooked grin that could have sold lies in any market across the kingdoms. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. I didn't respond. "You're exactly like they said. Sharp, closed, tired of being watched." He bowed slightly. "Thorn, by the way, the king's half-brother. Don't hold it against me. You don't act like you're royalty." "I'm not. Not really. Bastard-born. Kael got the throne, I got the charm. Works out. I didn't trust him." But there was something effortless in the way he spoke. Like he didn't care what I was. Like he didn't flinch at the fire coiled under my skin. He leaned closer. "You're not safe here." "No kidding." He tilted his head. "No, I mean really not safe. Idris wants you out. The nobles think you'll burn their little kingdom. They're not wrong. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like it when things burn," he said, smiling. "And because I think you're going to tear this place apart. I want a front row seat." Then he winked and walked away. I hated how much I didn't hate him. Later, Kael summoned me again, this time to the library. Endless towers of books, most written in languages I didn't know. Some whispered as I passed, others bit when I reached too close. He was waiting in the centre, standing beside a silver bowl of water. Without a word, he dropped something into it, a lock of my hair. I snarled. "What the hell?" "Watch." The water shimmered, turned black, and then an image. My mother. Alive, weak, bound, somewhere underground. Shadows shifting around her. She looked up, whispered my name. I staggered back. "That's impossible," I said. "She died. I buried her." "You buried what they wanted you to find," Kael said quietly. "You knew?" He nodded once. "And you didn't tell me?" "I couldn't. Not until you were ready, not until your blood fire began to stir. My hands curled into fists. What do you want from me, Kael? His gaze darkened. To survive. I stared at the image in the water, my mother's voice echoing in my bones. And I understood something then. Something I hadn't wanted to face. The Shadow Realm isn't just a secret kingdom. It's a cage, and I'm not the only one trapped inside.
Chapter 5, his side of the story. Kael's POV. The night she rejected me, I didn't bleed. I burned. The bond had been so clear, so absolute. When I saw her standing beneath the moonlight, all wild eyes and untamed grace, I knew. Every part of me knew. My wolf had stilled for the first time in years, quiet, reverent. And when her fingers touched mine, I felt the beginning of something ancient stir. Then she tore it away. I didn't stop her, couldn't. The visions hit her too hard. Death, fire, not memories, prophecies. Her body rejected the future, not me. But she couldn't know that, so I let her believe it, let her hate me, and I walked away. The rejection should have ended the bond. It didn't. Instead, it unlocked something. That night I crossed into the ruins of the forgotten border, a place no wolf had stepped in 1,000 years. The air was thicker, darker. Old power slept beneath the roots of that land, magic not meant for mortals. I found the Black Gate by accident. Or maybe it found me. It wasn't a gate in the traditional sense, no hinges, no guards, just a veil of night stretched between two broken pillars, pulsing with bloodlight. I stepped through, and the world changed. The Shadow Realm greeted me like an heir. The ground recognized my scent. The wolves bowed before me, creatures unlike anything in the mortal lands. They called me High Blood, they called me Returner. I was none of those things, at least not yet. But I listened, learned. There had once been a royal bloodline, half wolf, half god, that ruled this realm before it was sealed. The line had vanished during the First War, until one of its last hidden descendants returned. Me. The blood that burned in my veins. It wasn't just alpha blood, it was godfire. I never wanted a crown. I took it because I had no choice, because I saw what was coming. The visions that haunted Lyra at the gathering, I saw them too, in dreams, in flashes, in pain. A war that would tear the veil between worlds, a fire that would consume both mortal and immortal alike, and in every version of the future, she died, or I did. Or worse, we both lived but became monsters. So I took the throne, not to rule, to rewrite the ending. But the realm was fractured. Queen Idris, my aunt, ruled in my absence. She claimed she had protected the kingdom. In truth, she had poisoned it, corrupted the nobles, fed lies to the court. She didn't want peace, she wanted control, she wanted me dead. And now, she wanted Lyra. I felt her arrival before the guards said a word. The moment she crossed the veil into the Shadow Realm, the flames in the palace flared, the bond snapped taut like a noose, and my wolf, silent since the gathering, rose with a snarl. She was here, alive, glorious, but not ready, not yet. Watching her walk into my court was torture. She carried herself like a warrior now, not a frightened girl, but a flame coiled in human skin. And when she looked at me, she didn't flinch. She was still mine, even if she didn't know it. Especially because she didn't know it. I wanted to pull her into my arms, apologize for every secret, every silence, but I couldn't, because I'd seen it. The moment I told her everything, the fire would kill us both. She has to remember who she is on her own, or the gods will never let her live. I showed her the vision of her mother to buy time, not to manipulate her, to protect her. Because if she knew the truth, the real truth, too soon, it would shatter her. What truth? That the fire in her veins is older than the moon itself, that she was never meant to be my mate. She was meant to be my executioner. I've seen the prophecy in full. The Bloodfire Queen will awaken. She will either save this realm or destroy it. And she will do so by killing the God King, me. But there's one thing the gods didn't see coming. We're not their puppets anymore. If fate wants war, then I'll start it first, and I'll burn down the future before I let them take her from me again.
Chapter 6, Betrayer's Blood, Lyra's POV. I always thought my father died in the border wars. That's what my mother told me, that he'd been a loyal warrior, that he was honourable, brave, a hero. She even kept his blade in a velvet case, only ever touching it on his death day when she'd light a candle and whisper prayers to the moon. She never spoke his name, and now I knew why, because everything she told me was a lie. I found the truth hidden behind a false wall in the Shadow Realm's forbidden wing, the one Kael had warned me not to enter. So naturally I went straight in. It was Thorn who showed me the passage. With that same crooked grin and half-lie charm, he guided me through the dark like he'd done it before. "This isn't about loyalty," he said as we passed through a hall of silent statues. "It's about truth, and you deserve it, Fire Girl." "Why help me?" I asked. His expression dimmed for the first time, because once someone hid the truth from me too. Behind the wall was a room of memories, shelves full of scrolls, relics, sealed tomes marked with symbols I didn't understand. But one caught my eye. It glowed faintly gold, as if responding to the heat beneath my skin. I opened it. The first page bore a single phrase, inked in blood red: "Here ends the line of the fire-blooded king." I flipped the page and froze. A name, General Corin Wren, my father, and below that, treason. The file was a death record, not from the border wars, but from the High Council itself. Executed. Publicly. For crimes against the realm. He hadn't died protecting the kingdom. He died betraying it. Only it wasn't just a betrayal, it was worse. It said he tried to awaken the Bloodfire line, a forbidden blood magic sealed since the First War. It said he succeeded. It said he passed that power into his unborn child. Me! My hands trembled as I dropped the scroll. I was a walking sin. A crime sealed in flesh. That's why my mother never spoke his name. Not out of grief, out of fear. Because if anyone ever knew what I was, they would have killed me too. Thorn knelt beside me, his voice gentler than I thought he could manage. He wasn't evil, Lyra, just desperate. He saw what was coming. The gods, the war, your future. He tried to change it. He failed. "No," Thorn said, watching me carefully. "He didn't. You're here." I should have gone straight to Kael, should have demanded to know how long he had known. But when I returned to my room, he was already there, waiting. "I told you not to go into the forbidden wing," he said. "You knew." I did. I wanted to scream, hit him, burn him to ash. But the fury cracked under something worse, something hollow. "You let me believe he was a hero," I whispered. "I let you believe he was safe," Kael said quietly. "The world doesn't mourn Bloodfire wielders, it hunts them. If they knew who you were, you wouldn't have lived past your first moon. You should have told me. You weren't ready." I stepped back. "You don't get to decide that." His jaw clenched. "Then decide now. What will you do with what you are?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. But that night, I woke to flames licking at the ceiling. Not from me. From outside. The palace was under attack. I burst into the corridor and found chaos. Guards battling cloaked figures, wolves I didn't recognize flooding the halls with silver blades and shadow steel arrows. Thorn appeared, bleeding from a shoulder wound. "They're inside. It's Idris. She moved early." "Where's Kael?" "In the throne room. He won't leave it." We ran. The corridors blurred. The air smelled of blood and old magic. I shifted mid-sprint, my wolf taking over, claws scraping stone as I barreled through smoke and fire. When we reached the throne room, Kael stood alone, facing Queen Idris. She wasn't cloaked in silk anymore. She was cloaked in God's fire. She turned toward me, eyes glowing silver. Her lips curled into a slow smile. "Oh, little flame," she said. "You were never supposed to be here, but no matter, every fire can be extinguished." She raised a hand. Kael stepped between us. "No," he said. "Not her. I'm not here for her," Idris said. Then she looked at Thorn, and everything shattered because Thorn smiled and stabbed Kael in the back. Chapter 7. The Forbidden Bond. Lyra's POV. Time didn't slow. It shattered. The moment Thorn's blade pierced Kael's back, the world snapped into something primal. My vision blurred, my wolf howled through my bones, the air bent, the fire under my skin roared to life. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I burned. Kael collapsed to one knee, the dagger still lodged between his ribs. Idris stepped forward, power coiling around her like smoke. "He was never meant to rule," she said softly, like this was mercy, "and neither are you." My body moved before thought could catch up. I launched forward, claws shifting mid-strike, fire erupting from my hands. I wasn't myself anymore. I was something more, something older. The flames weren't red, they were white gold, purifying, terrifying. They struck Idris like lightning and sent her sprawling across the black stone floor. Thorn stared, not with fear, but with something worse, satisfaction. "Good," he whispered. "It's finally waking up." Then he vanished. Kael was dying. I dropped beside him, hands shaking as I pulled the dagger free. The wound pulsed with dark magic, poison laced with runes I couldn't read. He didn't cry out, just looked up at me, eyes dimming. "Too soon," he rasped. "You're not ready yet." "Shut up," I hissed, pressing my hands to his chest. "You don't get to die, not after all your lies." He smiled, and gods, it broke me. "Look at you," he whispered. "You found the fire." Don't talk like it's over. It was always going to end this way." No, it wasn't." "Then prove fate wrong." The mark on my neck, the mate mark, flared suddenly. Hot, alive. But that shouldn't have been possible. The bond was rejected, severed, dead. And yet, here it was, burning. Kael's fingers brushed mine, and something ancient snapped back into place. The mate bond reignited like a blade forged in a forgotten forge. Not soft, not healing, violent. A surge of memory crashed over me, not mine, his first kill, his first shift. The loneliness of godblood, the day he found the gate. The moment he saw me and knew I would one day kill him, and still chose me, I gasped, falling forward. My head against his chest, our flames colliding. This wasn't the moon goddess's bond. It was older, forbidden. The oracle had said it. The bond didn't break because it was never bound by their laws. Kael and I weren't just fated. We were designed, soul-tethered by a force older than time, a force that doesn't care about fate, only balance. Kael's wound sealed before my eyes. The magic, whatever ancient thing tied us together, healed him through me. His skin knitted shut. The poison burned out. He opened his eyes. But they weren't just red anymore. They were glowing gold and black, swirling like stars devouring themselves. God eyes. He sat up slowly. "You weren't supposed to be able to do that," he whispered. "Neither were you." We stared at each other. Something had changed. The bond, it didn't just return. It evolved. And that meant something terrifying. If one of us died now, the other would too. We didn't speak again until dawn. The throne room was still scorched, but the palace had stabilized. Idris was gone, Thorn too. Kael stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the sky flicker between this realm and another, like a veil was starting to lift. "We're running out of time," he said. I joined him. "Why did the bond come back?" "Because we never chose it," he said. "We accepted it. Then we rejected it. Now we forged it. Then what are we now?" He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw sorrow and fear. "We're not mates," he said. "We're mirrors." Chapter 8, The Prophecy Breaker, Lyra's POV. They found the oracle in the hollow forest, exactly where she said she'd die. Sitting in a circle of blackened trees, surrounded by ash and a sky that didn't move. Her eyes were closed, lips parted like she was whispering secrets to ghosts. But when I stepped into the circle, her eyes snapped open, and she smiled like I was a mistake the gods forgot to erase. "I warned him not to wake the fire," she said, "but boys never listen." Kael didn't want me to come. After the bond reignited, he changed. Not colder, but careful. He looked at me like I was something fragile, or maybe something fatal. He'd started pulling away, guarding his words, like he knew what the oracle was about to say. I needed to hear it anyway, so I came alone. "I want the truth," I told her. "No riddles, no visions, just say it." The oracle tilted her head. "Truth? Truth is too sharp for mortal minds." "I'm not mortal," she laughed, a dry, broken sound. "No, you're not, and that's the problem." She stood slowly, ash spilling from her robes like sand. Her eyes weren't clouded like before. They burned, silver and blood. "There were once two flames," she said, "one to birth the world, one to end it." "The sunfire and moonflame?" I asked. "No, the bloodfire and the godspark." She stepped closer. "Kael is the godspark. You little flame. You are the bloodfire. Not his balance. His opposite. You were never meant to be his mate. You were meant to be his end." The ground shifted beneath me. "No," I said. "We broke fate. We chose something else. We forged the bond." She reached up and touched my cheek, gently, almost motherly. "And that is what will destroy everything," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to choose him. You were supposed to kill him." She stepped back and her hands caught fire. White, pure, holy. She was burning herself from the inside out. "You ask for the truth, child, then take it." She thrust her flaming hands forward, and I saw. A vision took me, but not like before. This time I wasn't watching. I was there. The palace in ruins. The sky cracked open. Wolves turned to ash mid-shift. Magic boiling from the rivers. Kael kneeling. No crown, no armor, just bleeding, broken. And me, standing over him. My hands were the fire. My voice was the curse. And the last words I spoke before the world shattered? "I loved you." I ripped out of the vision screaming. the oracle was gone. Not dead, just dust. I staggered back through the hollow forest, through smoke and shadow, through trees whispering my name. Kael was waiting at the border. He didn't ask what I saw. He knew. He just took one look at me and said, "So now you understand." "I understand nothing. You saw it, didn't you?" he said quietly. "What happens if we stay bonded? If we love each other? I kill you." "Yes. And if I reject you again, then I die slower." We stared at each other. This wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a trap. The gods didn't give us a choice. They gave us opposite roles. One to rule, one to destroy. If I embrace my power fully, I kill him. If I deny it, I doom the world. "I won't do either," I said. He stepped closer. "Then what will you do?" "I'll do what they never saw coming." I looked into his eyes. "I'll burn the prophecy itself."
Chapter 9. The God Trap. Kael's POV. Summoning a god is not a matter of ritual candles or whispered incantations. It is a sacrifice, raw, painful, irreversible. I knelt in the sacred chamber beneath the ancient palace, the altar cold beneath my knees, its black stone worn smooth by centuries of forgotten worship. My hand trembled slightly as I drew the ancient dagger, its blade etched with runes that flickered faintly in the dim light. The same blade my father had used to crown himself king, now slick with my own blood. I let crimson drip steadily into the altar's carved basin, a slow, steady offering. Lyra stood beside me, her presence steady, unwavering, fire coiling beneath her skin like a storm waiting to break. She did not flinch, did not hesitate. I wondered briefly if she ever felt fear anymore, or if the bond we forged had burned it out entirely. The air thickened, pulsing with a power so ancient it hummed in my bones. The runes carved into the altar flared, gold, crimson, then black, each light awakening an echo from the past. I felt the ground shiver beneath us, the very foundation of the world, trembling at our call. Then Lyra pressed her palm to mine, and our blood mingled, not just as liquid, but as something alive. Magic hissed and twisted, threads of fire and shadow weaving into a tapestry that bent reality itself. The air grew heavy, the silence thick and suffocating. And then the world cracked open. They did not descend from the heavens in angelic glory. No, the gods emerged from the fissures in the earth, from shadows that had long lurked beneath the roots of the oldest trees, from forgotten corners where time dared not tread. Their forms were terrifying, a mass of shifting shapes and eyes that burned like dying stars. Wolves made of midnight smoke, serpents with voices like shattered glass, and a woman with 3 faces that morphed with every blink. The old ones, architects of fate, the keepers of destiny, had returned, and they were furious beyond comprehension. "You dare summon us," one hissed, its eyes glowing a cruel blue yet sightless. "You break the cycle," another echoed, the voice like a cold wind inside my skull. "You were warned," the third whispered, her faces shifting unnervingly, one familiar as my mother, one as my enemy, and the last as Lyra herself. Lyra's eyes never wavered. She stepped forward, her flames burning brighter, illuminating the ancient chamber in hues of gold and scarlet. "We didn't summon you," she said with a calm sharpness. "We trapped you." The circle carved into the earth behind us erupted with power. Ash from the oracle's grove, ink from the forbidden bloodfire scrolls, and silver forged under the pale moonsight intertwined to seal the god's fate. The air snapped and crackled like a cage locking shut. The gods screamed, a sound that shattered stone and rattled the soul. Bound, trapped, mortal. For the first time in centuries, the untouchable became vulnerable. "Why do this?" the one wearing my mother's face demanded, eyes blazing. "To rewrite the story," I replied, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "There is no rewriting, only rerunning," the goddess spat, venom dripping from her words. "No," Lyra growled, stepping into the center of the circle like a queen claiming her throne. "You made us enemies when you could have made us whole. You wrote me as the destroyer and him as the king, but you never imagined we'd work together." "Love is not power," one sneered. Lyra's smile was cold and dangerous. "No, but power without love burns everything." She raised her hand and I raised mine. When our flames touched, the cage sealed. The gods struck back, not with claws or fire, but with visions. They tore at our minds, unveiling nightmares meant to break us. I saw myself dying in Lyra's arms, blood pooling beneath us like ink. I saw Lyra slipping into shadow, eyes black as void, laughing over my corpse. The visions clawed, ripping at our sanity, but we held firm, we burned together. Her flames were pure light, mine were dark shadow. When they collided, the altar shook violently. The cage, the trap, the very prison we built, it shattered. One god fell instantly. The wolf with the bell-like voice turned to ash in a howl that echoed through the realms. Another fled into the roots of the earth, howling in defeat. Only the oldest remained, the one wearing Lyra's face, silent until now. "You've ruined everything," she said, voice soft but thunderous. "No," Lyra whispered, stepping forward with steady grace. "We've started something new." The god lunged, swift and merciless. Lyra met her strike, but not with fire, with mercy. She touched the god's heart and spoke a single word, one heavy with power and hope. "Choose." The god faltered, shuddered, trembling like a mortal. Then, for a moment that stretched like eternity, she knelt and vanished, dissolving into starlight. The trap was set. The world shifted. A tower fell in another dimension, unseen but felt. The chains of prophecy shattered like brittle glass. For the first time, fate went silent. We stood there, hands intertwined, breaths ragged, in the stillness of the altar chamber. Lyra looked at me with something I'd never seen before, something tender and fierce. "I didn't kill you," she whispered. "You still might," I said, half joking, half serious. She smiled faintly, a spark of fire lighting her eyes. "I'll try not to."
Chapter 10. The Last Queen. Lyra's POV. I returned to the mortal realm with a weight in my chest heavier than any crown. The palace gates loomed like silent sentinels, their iron twisted by years of neglect and whispered betrayal. Without the gods watching, without fate guiding our steps, everything felt unhinged, raw, unpredictable, like a world that had been waiting, breath held, for the moment order unravelled. The throne room was empty, not just of people but of hope. The kingdom had fractured. Word travelled fast when the gods disappeared. Without divine law, nobles clawed for power like starving wolves. The court became a battlefield where whispers turned to daggers and every smile hid a venomous plot. The king's advisors vanished overnight, replaced by shadowy figures with eyes colder than winter. And in the midst of this chaos stood a throne with no ruler. I was supposed to be the queen, the one who united. But the people looked at me with suspicion, the girl who rejected her mate, the one who shattered prophecy and let the gods fall silent. Some called me a saviour, others a curse. My first act was to gather the remnants of the royal guard, those still loyal to the old ways, and ask a question they dreaded: who truly ruled now? The answer came not in words but steel. The city's streets burned, fires blazed beneath moonless skies as rebels and mercenaries fought for scraps of power. The palace was a cage with broken locks. I realised then, without the gods, the kingdom was a beast clawing its own heart out. Then, in the darkness, a new player emerged. The last queen, not me. A shadow from the past, thought dead. She arrived cloaked in silk and poison, eyes like knives that cut deeper than any sword. She claimed the throne by blood, not birth. A woman who had learned to bend fate through cruelty and cunning. Her name was Ceres, and she wanted me gone. Ceres's power wasn't in armies, but in secrets. She wielded the fear of the people, the rumours that grew like wildfire. She whispered that I was the destroyer, that my love for Kael doomed us all, that the gods fell because I dared to challenge them. She poisoned minds. And soon the palace wasn't just a battleground of steel, it was a war for hearts and souls. I couldn't fight her with swords. I had to fight fire with fire. I gathered those who believed in something more than prophecy. The outcasts, the dreamers who wanted to build a world where fate was a choice, not a chain. Together, we would become more than survivors. We would become a rebellion. As I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the wind tugging at my cloak, I understood the truth that had been whispered all along. To be queen is not to sit on a throne, it is to stand in the storm and command it.
Chapter 11. The Shadow King, Kael's POV. The city was no longer a place of light and hope. It had become a maze of shadows and whispers, a battlefield where every corner concealed a threat and every word was laced with danger. Streets once vibrant with life were now choked with smoke and ash. The air tasted of fear and desperation, thick enough to suffocate even the bravest heart. I walked through the rebel camp under the cloak of night, my mind heavy with the weight of everything we had lost, and everything still at stake. The crown I once imagined as a symbol of power felt now like an iron shackle, binding me to a fate I desperately wanted to change but could not escape. The throne I was meant to claim seemed more like a cage, and the enemies were no longer just Ceres and her twisted ambitions. They were darker, more terrifying. When the message came, it was simple and chilling. A scrap of bloodied parchment bearing only 3 words, "Meet at midnight." No seal, no signature, just the stark command that pulled me into the heart of the city's ruins, where old gods once whispered and men made their deals. The temple was a relic of forgotten times, its cracked pillars swallowed by creeping vines, its altar shattered and stained with centuries of lost prayers. The moon hid behind thick clouds, casting the world into a deep, suffocating blackness. My footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, as I waited for the unknown. Then he appeared. He was taller than any man I had ever seen, his figure draped in shadows that seemed to writhe and flicker like living smoke. His eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural light that pierced the darkness with cold, unyielding clarity. The weight of his presence crushed the silence around us. "The king you knew is dead," he said, his voice a harsh rasp like steel scraping stone. I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. "Who are you?" He smiled, but it was a smile without warmth, a cruel curve of lips hiding terrible truths. "I am the shadow behind the throne, the secret your enemies kept buried." His words shattered the fragile hope I clung to. He told me of the true ruler, no mortal born of flesh and blood, but a god bound in chains of darkness, hidden for centuries beneath the kingdom's foundations. Ceres was but a puppet in his grand design, a queen in name but slave in spirit, wielding fear like a blade for a master who waited patiently for the perfect moment to rise. The revelation was like poison flooding my veins. The kingdom's fate was tied not to human ambition, but to the will of an ancient god whose hunger for power knew no bounds. The war I thought we were fighting was only the beginning. This was a battle for the soul of our world. The Shadow King extended a pale, slender hand towards me, the shadows around him swirling with dark promise. "Join me," he urged. "Together we will rule this broken kingdom and remake it in our image." Behind him, the city burned, fires raging in the streets, the cries of the desperate rising to the sky. My people caught in the crossfire of gods and mortals. I stood at a crossroads, the weight of my choices pressed down like the very darkness surrounding us. I met his gaze, searching for the man I wanted to be, the king who would protect, not destroy. And at that moment, I made my choice. Chapter 12, The King's Choice, Kael's POV. The throne room was a cavern of silence, broken only by the distant rumble of battle beyond the shattered windows. The scent of smoke and ash clung to the air, a constant reminder of how much had been lost, and how much was still at stake. I stood alone beneath the weight of the crown, feeling it pressed down on my head like a leaden chain, binding me not with gold or jewels, but with impossible expectations and impossible choices. I looked around at the remnants of my kingdom, walls cracked and crumbled, banners torn and faded, a legacy teetering on the edge of oblivion. All my life, I believed that ruling meant power, command, control. But now I knew the truth. Power was a burden, a sacrifice, a lonely road walked in shadows. Ceres's face haunted me, the poison behind the throne, the queen who played with fear like a blade. But she was only a symptom of a greater sickness. The gods bound in darkness beneath us, the ancient forces clawing to break free. The Shadow King's offer echoed in my mind, tempting me with a kingdom forged from shadows, ruled with iron and fire. But to accept was to lose myself, to become the very darkness I swore to fight. I closed my eyes and thought of Lyra, of the fire that burned within her, unyielding, fierce and alive. The flames of rebellion, hope and love she had kindled in the ashes of this broken world. She had said it clearly once, we don't have to be what the gods wrote. We can write our own story. The silence thickened. I opened my eyes and saw her standing there, no throne, no crown, just the truth in her gaze. I reached out, trembling, and took her hand. Her warmth anchored me, steadying the storm raging inside. "Then we burn the old world down," I whispered, "together." At that moment, the very air around us seemed to crackle and ignite. The chains binding the gods shattered in a burst of light and shadow, and the ground beneath the palace trembled like the heartbeat of a world waking from a nightmare. For the first time, the kingdom held its breath. The future was no longer written in prophecy or blood. It was ours, and I would be the king who chose freedom. The end. Thank you for listening. Please like, share and subscribe if you would love to read one more chapter that keeps you in the loop.